She accidentally joined a Zoom call. What the CEO revealed changed everything forever. Jessica had only meant to find a quiet spot in the bustling cafe to pay her overdue bills, the details of which were digging deeper into her thoughts like claws. With Lucas at school, she had hoped to snatch a moment of peace, but instead, she found herself clicking a link on her phone by mistake. The moment the Zoom call loaded, her stomach dropped. A glossy, polished interface filled the screen, with a confident CEO addressing a cadre of board members clad in suits. She was a world away from that life, the life she desperately wanted for herself and her son. As the discussion unfolded about an ambitious project tackling economic inequality, Jessica felt a mix of intrigue and frustration. In a place like Willow Creek, economic opportunities felt like a mirage. She could practically hear her own heartbeat against the din of their corporate jargon. Could the man in the tailored suit see her struggling friends? The mother she recognized in the food bank line? They discussed solutions and strategies, but Jessica knew the bitter truth of survival day by day. The narratives didn't match. She hesitated at first, unsure if she should speak up in this foreign environment. Words like privilege and power rolled off their tongues with ease, but her life was a fight against that very power. Jessica's eyes flicked to the dollar signs dancing above her head, the bills, the debts, Lucas's winter coat that had shed its warmth last season. This was her reality, and she'd be damned if she let it slip away like so many voices before her. Gathering her resolve, she took a breath, her heart pounding as urgency surged. Could she be a voice in this world that felt so disconnected? "We're not just statistics," she blurted, her voice surprising herself with its sharp confidence. Silence washed over the room. The board members turned to her, their expressions shifting from polished aloofness to raw surprise. She felt raw too, the revelation that she had burst through opulent bubbles to expose a truth they clearly wanted to ignore. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue." Instinctively, she felt a sizzling rush of empowerment even as anxiety clawed at her insides. The gap between her and these privileged people visibly narrowed in that moment. She had their attention. Yet, her heart ached at the thought of what this exposure would mean for her small-town life, the whispers and criticisms waiting. Would they see her as a hero or a nuisance? Anxiety loomed larger than ever as the faces around her shifted between curiosity and skepticism. As she prepared to enter yet another round of newfound public scrutiny from neighbors raising brows to reports done in her name, she found herself at an emotional tipping point. Could she balance her role as a devoted mother with being thrust into the limelight? That question gnawed at her throughout the muddled moments leading up to the community meeting where everything could either pivot towards hope or spiral into chaos. Her heart raced as she considered the gnawing paradox before her. Speaking out could either bring light to the plight she faced, or it could consume her whole. Eyes turned to her, but were they supportive or suspect? As she looked up to speak, her screen froze suddenly. A visceral jolt shot through her, leaving her breathless. Would this be the moment everything changed, or just another moment lost to fate? The second stretching into an eternity felt like an unrelenting vice on Jessica's chest. The screen's stuttering remnants of the sophisticated call distorted the clarity of her thoughts. Doubt crept in like the cold air drifting through the cafe, assaulting her senses and numbing the thrill she had just felt. Had she made a mistake? What if this all came crumbling down? Perhaps she was just a faceless glitch in their well-organized world. In that charged silence, a part of her wished she could sink back into anonymity, to vanish among the cafe's clinking dishes and muffled chats. Yet the flicker of determination sparked again, awakening instincts that had lain dormant beneath layers of fear and insecurity. What choice did she have? Silence was no longer an option, it never had been if she was to change anything for Lucas or herself. The screen finally flickered back to life, but the voices from her phone felt distant. Would her brief moment of audacity resound, or would it dissolve into nothingness? Jessica observed the faces in the call, their expressions now a mixture of intrigue and apprehension. They didn't know her, yet she had managed to penetrate their carefully constructed facade. The real question was whether she would let this opportunity slip through her fingers. As the Zoom call proceeded, she discreetly began jotting down notes, her adrenaline-filled mind churning with thoughts. Terms and strategies flew around her like wildfire, a language she initially found foreign but desperately sought to decode. Each successive point made by the CEO echoed within her, triggering a cascade of ideas. She envisioned connecting these lofty discussions to the gritty realities she and her community faced. An unexpected bolt of energy surged through her. What if she could channel their ambitions into something real? The CEO was now introducing a nationwide outreach program aimed at addressing economic disparities. Jessica's mind raced, envisioning her neighbors, the single mothers juggling 2 jobs, the young adults with dreams unfurling like fragile petals but stunted by lack of investment. What if she could be the bridge between their conversations and their actions? Perhaps her voice could steer them toward a true understanding of what those solutions looked like on the ground. The ink swirling on her notepad became less frantic, morphing into lists, points to address, questions to ask, ideas to pitch. She was crafting her narrative as much as theirs, infusing her perspective into the labyrinth of corporate speak. Once viewed as an outsider, she now saw an opportunity to carve out a space where her lived experience could shape policy. As the meeting wrapped up, her heart sank slightly at the thought of being relegated back to her initial role as a mere observer. But her mind buzzed, the potential of her ideas electrifying the air around her. Before the call ended, Jessica took a deep breath, adrenaline coursing through her yet again. She had to act now. Raising her hand, she interrupted, "Excuse me. Since we're discussing outreach, may I suggest involving community voices in the planning? Authentic insights can lead to genuine solutions." It was a gamble, she could sense the tension twist once more among those polished professionals. Would they welcome her perspective or dismiss it? Her gamble paid off with a contemplative nod from the CEO. "That's an interesting point," he said, "perhaps we could consider including grassroots perspectives in our approach." This small acknowledgement felt like a monumental win for Jessica. She didn't just want to be a voice, she wanted to become an advocate, weaving her story and those of others into the larger narrative of change. As she signed off, a new realization settled within her: this was just the beginning. The evening air was thick with responsibility as she left the cafe. Could she truly harness this momentum? A sense of purpose ignited her spirit as she crafted a plan in her mind, not just for her but also for her community. However, the weight of her new role hung like a shadow over her. How to grasp it without losing herself in the fray? With each passing step toward home, she wondered about the repercussions of her boldness. Would the local narratives shift with her newfound cadence? Tonight was just one instance, but she knew the fight was far from over. The lines were drawn, and with the meeting behind her, she anxiously anticipated the doubts and challenges that lay ahead. What lay in wait for her as she prepared for the community meeting, where her experiences might clash head-on with persistent attitudes? The next chapter of her journey was unfolding, and she needed to be ready. The next morning unfolded with an uneasy clarity as Jessica poured herself a cup of coffee, the steam lingering in the air like unspoken commitments. The sun spilled through her kitchen window, illuminating the notepad filled with frantic notes from last night's call. Her heart pounded with anticipation, yet beneath that lay a tinge of fear. What had she actually signed up for? The meeting she was preparing for could unearth buried conflicts that had long prevented her from voicing her opinions. Sitting at her cluttered kitchen table, she turned her attention to the community meeting scheduled for later that day. The weight of responsibility felt tangible as she considered the lives she represented. Did she truly have the right to shape their narrative? The surreal awareness of her potential influence rattled her confidence. It wasn't just about sharing ideas, it was about risking vulnerability in a space where she was still viewed as an outsider. As she prepped, her mind swirled with potential dialogues and rebuttals. The local leaders and residents would expect her to discuss their reality, yet would they accept a new angle, her angle? She could feel the sweat of anxiety forming on her brow. How would they react when she suggested that their decades-old tactics might not suffice against the emerging challenges? Given the history they shared, holding her ground would be a test of mettle. This meeting would be critical not just in promoting her agenda but also in solidifying her status among peers who had long viewed her contributions as fleeting. Jessica took a deep breath, aware of the tremor in her hands as she set goals for the meeting, each one reflecting not only her ambitions but also her fears of being undermined or attacked. Reinforced by adrenaline and unexpected resolve, she started drafting key points. Radical empathy, she wrote, the phrase spilling out effortlessly onto the page. It resonated deeply within her. What if she could invoke empathy as a tool for change? Not just for herself but for the voices she often felt muted. She began crafting a message that blended personal experience with the statistics she had learned during the call. Time ticked on, and with each passing moment, her fear ebbed into determination. She dressed with intent, wearing an outfit that balanced professionalism with a level of approachability, a carefully curated blend of confidence and authenticity. As she walked to the community center, the weight of her new role settled on her shoulders like a cloak. It reminded her just how much was at stake in her quest for acknowledgement. Her voice had to resonate, transforming disappointment into hope. Entering the room, she found that familiar sight: long tables hastily arranged, coffee and pastries beckoning from the corner. The chatter of her community members, a mix of concern and engagement, reverberated against her skin, amplifying her heartbeats. As she settled in, there was an unmistakable air of skepticism among some familiar faces. Old narratives lingered in the air like the stale aroma of burnt coffee. Would they still see her as a neighborhood kid, or had she stepped into a new identity? As she glanced at the array of faces, a fire ignited within her. She would prove herself, her vision carrying weight. When her turn came to speak, silence fell like a curtain. "I've spent years observing," she began, grounding herself in vulnerability, "and I've seen the struggles and strengths among us. I think it's time we introduce radical empathy into our approach to existing solutions. Let us reshape our narrative together." With those words, buried doubts twisted inside her, but they flared into something bigger. She could see a few eyebrows raise, a glimmer of intrigue piercing through the skepticism. As the discussion unfolded, opposing perspectives clashed. Conversation sparked, evolving from resistance to curiosity. But amidst this newfound energy, Jessica noticed a looming shadow across the room. One of the community leaders, a long-standing figure of authority who thrived on the familiar patterns, appeared poised to confront her directly. The tight line of his mouth mirrored the tension in the room, and her stomach churned with anticipation. Would this confrontation be her breaking point or her breakthrough? The moment had come. She would either be suffocated by existing norms or redefine her role. The breath rushed from her lungs as she leaned in to brace herself for the inevitable challenge. What would it take for her to emerge not just as a participant, but as a leader capable of shifting the narrative? The outcome of this confrontation could mark a pivotal moment in her journey, and she couldn't shake the sinking realization that everything was teetering on the edge. The leader rose, his presence unmistakably commanding despite the casual nature of the gathering. Jessica's heart raced as she prepared for the inevitable. Butterflies danced in her stomach. The stirring debate around her, once invigorating, now felt like a wrestling match she had not fully entered yet. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, Jessica," he began, his voice deep with authority, "but it seems like you're proposing something we already tried years ago. Empathy is nice, but actions are what drive change." His gaze, steady and piercing, sought to undermine her words before they could take root. The weight of his challenge pressed against her, a potential smothering or a call to rise. The room held its breath, eyes darting between the two of them. There in that crucible, she confronted the very essence of her insecurities. Was he correct? Was she just another voice spouting empty platitudes? But beneath that doubt, impulses began to swell, a tempest of personal growth fueling her resolve. Actions do define change, she rebutted, her voice steadier than she felt. But they are birthed from understanding. Without empathy, how can we ensure our actions address the true needs? She could see the flicker of surprise in some faces. It wasn't the first time a discussion took a spirited turn, but the intent behind her words felt undeniably fresh. As she continued, she chose her words carefully, guiding the audience through the chasm of doubt. This isn't about sweeping away our history, it's about evolution. We need to listen, adapt, and embrace the changes around us rather than resist them. Beneath her own convictions, she sensed the shifting dynamics, a thematic wave of curiosity tinged with skepticism. Who are you to redefine our way? He shot back, his voice a weapon, designed to intimidate. Jessica's breath caught, but in that moment, her internal fortitude kicked in. Who indeed? The act of standing wasn't just about this meeting, it was about her journey, her evolution, a personal revelation distilled from countless moments of self-reflection. She had worried about being viewed as an outsider, but this was her opportunity to step in, to own the space as her own. Someone who has spent years witnessing both triumphs and failures, she said, the resolve deepening her spirit. Just because I am new doesn't mean I lack a vision. Sometimes, fresh perspectives can challenge stagnant views. Those words were her armor, the realization of her hidden competency wielded like a sword. The murmurs in the room shifted, some nodding, others still skeptical. It wasn't her win or loss at stake anymore, it was a chance to catalyze a much-needed dialogue. Seizing the moment, she pressed onward, circumventing the battlefield of ego. I invite you to be part of a future that acknowledges our past and dares to embrace the universal empathy. It's a bridge, not a wall. The echo of her voice laid heavy with intent, creating ripples of contemplation. But there lingered an unsettled response in the air. They had been accustomed to directives and long-established norms. Would one voice be enough to topple decades of tradition? She sensed the undercurrents of opposition still alive, simmering beneath the surface. Doubt rose like bile in her throat. Maybe it was still too early for such a vision of change. As the discussion meandered further into nuanced debates, Jessica faced new questions about her path, her worthiness. Was she truly equipped to embrace this leadership role, to invite authenticity? The desperation for approval lingered, and every counter-argument stung like an arrow. Yet, despite the fatigue clawing at her focus, a fire persisted. Her vision blurred into a focused aim. She would not falter. Committing fully, she looked into the eyes of her opponents, willing them to challenge her further. She would navigate this labyrinth of resistance, emerging not merely as an advocate but a leader. Rising action filled the air, a coalition might form, perhaps even under her banner. What new stage awaited her as she pushed forth to engage deeply with the community's needs? Sudden silence enveloped the room when a hand raised. A young resident, eyes glimmering with uncertainty yet potent with a hunger for change, offered a question that spiraled the room towards a new level of engagement. What would she reveal as the next step in her quest for leadership? Would this inquiry rejuvenate the conversation or plunge it into further chaos? A calmness settled over the gathering as all eyes shifted toward the young resident, waiting with bated breath for the next turn in the dialogue. Jessica felt the weight of expectation pressing down, like a thick fog enveloping the room. In the silence, anticipation buzzed through her veins. The stakes had risen, and she knew that how she responded would shape not just her voice but potentially the course of this discourse. "What can you do to change things for us?" the resident asked, genuine curiosity glimmering in her eyes, tinged with a desperate hope for actionable solutions. It was a question that rung clear and true amidst the noise. In that moment, Jessica recognized the depth of her responsibility. It wasn't simply her ideas for change that mattered, but the tangible steps she could propose to translate those ideals into realities. As she gathered her thoughts, a whirlwind of strategies raced through her mind. She could almost see the intricate web of aspirations and fears laid out before her. How many residents felt voiceless? How many were longing for authenticity? What would it take to foster a culture where discovery thrived? Was she prepared to confront those questions head-on in a meaningful way? Drawing a deep breath, she began to outline her vision. Empathy starts with listening, truly listening, to the voices that often go unheard. I propose that we create regular forums to gather community insight, structured spaces where concerns and ideas can be shared openly. It's vital that everyone sees they play a part in shaping our future. Across the room, reactions rippled like water disturbed by a pebble. Some leaned in, intrigued. Others crossed their arms, skeptical. But she sensed a shift. Even the leader, who moments ago had been her fiercest opponent, appeared contemplative. Perhaps her words were igniting something deeper, a realization that change rarely stems from a singular voice but flourishes through collaboration. Jessica felt both exhilaration and fear, a dichotomy that pushed her forward. What if they treated her suggestion as naive? What if they were unwilling to abandon their comfort zones? Yet, the intensity of her emotions compelled her to press ahead. Moreover, she continued, we can focus on skill-sharing initiatives. Many here possess invaluable expertise: artists, educators, activists, individuals who can mentor and guide others. Just imagine merging experiences and strengthening our collective skill set. As she spoke, a vision crystallized in her mind of a vibrant tapestry woven from diverse personalities. The energy in the room seemed to pulse in rhythm with her fervor, a collective heartbeat awakening to the narrative she was weaving. Then came another voice, a familiar one. The leader leaned forward, cutting through her momentum, his tone laced with caution. And how will you ensure that the shared knowledge doesn't become yet another echo chamber? How can you guarantee real, meaningful engagement? His question wasn't an attack, it was an invitation to delve deeper. The fact that he sought clarification indicated a small opening, a crack in the armor of resistance. This was her chance to be unyielding in her commitment to accountability. That's the crux of authentic change, isn't it? She replied, meeting his gaze with unwavering confidence. We must dismantle the barriers to authenticity by establishing a feedback mechanism, a way to assess and evolve our approaches continuously. It's not just about ideas but following through with results. If we fail to adapt or if voices go unheard, we must acknowledge it, learn from it, and do better. The momentum built, each response feeding into the next. She felt like a conductor orchestrating a symphony, balancing skepticism with hope, pushing toward a crescendo of collective action. The conversations began to flow more freely, ideas bouncing back and forth like a game of catch, drawing in more participants. But beneath her growing assurance lay a flicker of doubt. Was it enough? Would her proposals resonate beyond this room and create lasting impact? Her instincts urged her to protect her vulnerability while stepping boldly into the role she was beginning to claim. As discussions carried on, the initial clamor faded into something profound, a dialogue that linked hearts and minds. Jessica had not merely defended her position but had ignited the potentially transformative spark she had envisioned. Yet, amid the fervor, echoes of dissent tugged at her consciousness. What complexities still lurked in the shadows? Would negotiations give rise to unforeseen challenges in implementing her ideas? As she walked this newfound path of leadership, how would she navigate the intricate labyrinth of ambitions and fears lying ahead? With those questions lingering, she realized her journey was just beginning, not just as a voice for others, but as a steward of change in a landscape ripe for evolution. What mercurial twists awaited her at the next crossroads? The following week brought a kaleidoscope of emotions each day, a fresh layer of doubt mingled with a newfound promise. Jessica paced her small apartment, replaying the discussions she had led in her mind like a looping reel. Each voice, each hesitant agreement, felt like a vibration beneath her skin, urging her forward. Yet, she remained aware of the unease that clung to the edges of her consciousness. Was her vision for change merely a temporary spark, or could it truly ignite a lasting transformation? The thought sent her heart racing and forced her to confront her deepest insecurities. What if she misestimated the appetite for change in her peers? What if their skepticism morphed into outright resistance? Jessica rubbed her temples, trying to alleviate the tension that pushed relentlessly against her skull. Deciding it was time to act, she set out for the community meeting with a list of strategies and a heart prepared for honesty. The sun hung low in the sky, casting elongated shadows across the familiar path to the venue. Each footstep felt weighted, half eager, half apprehensive. She knew she had to solidify her earlier momentum, to build something tangible from the seeds she had sown. As she entered the room where the gathering was held, she was met by the familiar faces she had seen just days prior. Their expressions were a mix of expectation and uncertainty. Her heart raced. This was not merely a continuation of discussions but a crossroads where her ideas would be put to the test. Could she truly cultivate authenticity and collaboration among those who had previously hailed from disparate worlds? Before she could lose herself in second-guessing, the leader approached her, a thoughtful expression etched on his face. "I've been going over your ideas," he said slowly. "I'm intrigued, but I need to understand how you envision this actually happening. I need to believe it can work." Jessica took a breath. This was what she had been yearning for, an opportunity for clarity, a chance to ensure her approach wasn't just theoretical. "Let us start with a pilot program," she suggested, voice steady. "We could implement a series of workshops in which people can share skills, ideas, and experiences. We could also set up an anonymous feedback system to gauge satisfaction and barriers. Transparency is key." His brow furrowed, and Jessica sensed a wave of resistance beginning to form. "Are you prepared for the backlash? People often cling fiercely to their comfort zones. Disrupting that can lead to significant pushback." Those words stung, igniting an internal conflict. She could feel her confidence waver, her heart quickening with the fear of failure, but she knew that this was the moment to confront her self-doubt. "Yes, I'm aware," she replied, her voice tinged with determination. "But the only way to grow is to step into discomfort. If we don't challenge ourselves and each other, we may just remain stagnant." As the meeting unfolded, different perspectives emerged, sometimes clashing but occasionally harmonizing. The leader's concerns resonated with many attendees, who voiced their fears of disrupting existing systems. Yet, Jessica found herself rising above the cacophony. With each rebuttal, she honed her arguments, clarity replacing hesitation. In that moment, she realized that her role was not just to offer a solution but to become a bridge between anxieties and aspirations. The dynamics in the room shifted, the conversation morphing from skepticism into healthy debate. The shared struggle pointed toward a collective commitment to change, illuminating pathways she hadn't imagined moments before. But as the discussion progressed, a barrier emerged, a faction of staunch traditionalists who vehemently opposed her ideas. Their emotions and arguments became increasingly fierce, and their certainty fed her tension. Jessica shifted her strategies, turning toward those who were most engaged, yet the entrenched opposition loomed like a storm cloud overhead, threatening to drown the hopeful voices. What would it take to ensure that her vision gained traction beyond this moment? How could she convert disbelief into action? Struggling to keep her focus, she felt an urgency swelling within, but the fear of a fracture formed in her stomach. Deep down, she knew this confrontation could redefine her journey or dismantle it completely. As the momentum built, she looked for solutions, strategizing her next steps and sensing the need for a deeper engagement with her detractors. This was not merely about survival, it was about resilience and growth. Would she have the fortitude to confront the cynics and emerge transformed, or would the shadows of doubt cloud her journey yet again? Conflict sparked anew, leaving her aching to discover what lay ahead. The following days were a flurry of planning and anticipation. Jessica's mind was a battleground of possibilities and pitfalls, the friction between optimism and anxiety sparking her creativity. She embraced a routine that barely allowed her to pause, early mornings filled with research on facilitation techniques, late nights spent drafting detailed workshop structures aimed to engage even the most hesitant participants. Yet, in this chaos, a nagging thought persisted: would her efforts be enough to sway skeptics? The leader's staunch opposition lingered like a specter in her thoughts, manifesting during her planning sessions. Each time she rehearsed her messaging, their concerns emerged, a chorus of doubt taunting her confidence. But she was resolute, clutching tightly to a belief she was beginning to settle into. Authentic change necessitated genuine confrontation. It was time to distill her vision into clear, actionable steps. On the eve of the first workshop, the air felt electric. Jessica gathered her materials, pausing to reflect on her journey thus far. The stakes had never felt higher, yet the growing sense of purpose coursed through her veins like fire. She recalled the fierce opposition she had faced. Their perspectives were not to be ignored but understood and addressed. The following morning, she arrived early at the meeting space, meticulously arranging chairs to stimulate open dialogue. She envisioned creating an inviting atmosphere, where tradition could intertwine with innovation. As familiar faces began to trickle in, apprehension settled over her like a shroud, but she plastered on a smile, ready to take flight. Jessica initiated the session with confident clarity, outlining what they would explore together, emphasizing collaboration over confrontation. She facilitated discussions, gently prompting participants to share their thoughts on the existing methods that idealistically separated them. To her surprise, participation soared. Even some of the naysayers leaned in, drawn to the sincere inquiry into their discomfort and skepticism. But as she guided the exercises forward, she encountered a sharp resistance from one particular attendee, a seasoned veteran, openly critical of the proposed changes. His voice rang out, loud and unwavering. "This is all well and good, but we can't just abandon proven methods for trendy ideas. Change doesn't come easy, and it shouldn't," he asserted, his words laced with intensity. Jessica felt her heartbeat quicken. The confrontation loomed large. But rather than retreating into self-doubt, she met his gaze head-on, her own pulse steadying as conviction seeped into her voice. "That's precisely why we're here today, to examine what's working and what isn't, and explore how we can adapt together. It's not about abandonment, it's about evolution." The room fell silent, tension palpable in the air. Jessica sensed the weight of change. They were at a precipice. This was not merely a battle for acceptance of new ideas, it was a challenge to the very foundation of their roles. As her intuitive understanding of the situation deepened, she found herself questioning the man's motives. Was he genuinely concerned about preserving traditions, or was his stance a mask for deeper insecurities about change? Attempting to disarm the tension, she added, "Let us capture your insights on our legacy. What do you believe truly defines our excellence? And how can we integrate that into the direction we wish to take?" The question floated out into the space, an olive branch extended across the expanse between them. The man blinked, momentarily caught off guard by her willingness to listen and engage. Gradually, the skeptical tones around the room began to soften as other participants joined in, showcasing their own perceptions of the changes she proposed. Jessica felt the energy shift. What had begun with resistance was morphing into a tapestry of ideas and aspirations. As the session continued, the air echoed with voices exchanging intricacies, ideas sparking new forms of collaboration. In that moment, she felt a surge of hope, an inkling that perhaps, just perhaps, she was carving a path toward genuine transformation. But the looming recognition of yet unconquered opposition made her acutely aware that this was only the beginning. She had to keep pushing, engaging, challenging not just others but herself to remain committed to the vision they were cultivating together. As participants left, suggestions in hand, Jessica looked around the room, pondering her next steps. Little did she know, a new adversary awaited her just beyond the horizon, one that would test her resolve in ways she had not yet imagined. Would she rise to the occasion once more, or would she crumble under the pressure of unforeseen challenges? The journey was far from over. She felt the horizon trembling with promise and danger. As days passed after the workshop, Jessica relished the flickering hope ignited by the session's unexpected success. Each passing interaction formulated a new strain of confidence, but tucked beneath it was her persistent self-doubt, the nagging thought that today's triumph could morph into tomorrow's upheaval. She pushed herself to stay in the present moment, to savor the small victories while bracing for the inevitable ripples of resistance still lurking. Her routine tightened further as she set a personal agenda to reshape the lingering skepticism within the organization. Each day commenced with deeper dives into industry-leading facilitation methods, sourced from online forums and webinars. The aim was clear: arm herself with knowledge that would not only help her effectively communicate the needed changes but also equip her to withstand potential criticism with conviction. It was crucial for her to embody the evolution she wanted to see, an embodiment of confidence that she forcefully practiced in front of her mirror at home. Yet, at the back of her mind, the memory of that critical veteran's gaze loomed large. He was the embodiment of the resistance she faced, his opinions carried weight, and Jessica recognized that she could not dismiss his influence. Confronting her growing anxiety, she resolved to engage him directly, not as an adversary but as a potential ally. One afternoon, Jessica orchestrated a small informal gathering intended to foster camaraderie and collect insights. She invited employees across various levels, purposely ensuring the veteran was present. It was a calculated risk, one that could swing either way: she could strengthen divisions or begin mending a critical seam. As they chatted, a light atmosphere enveloped them, and Jessica noticed the usual apprehensive tension easing. When the conversation inevitably turned to the future, she saw her chance to interject. "I value our history and what has made us successful. But I believe the path forward necessitates some shifts." She directed a confident look to the veteran, willing him to engage. "How can we ensure the essence of our legacy isn't disregarded while we innovate?" The man shifted uncomfortably, the visible tension kinking his brows. "Innovation is pointless without the foundations of success," he blurted, defensively. Yet, as Jessica maintained eye contact, she sensed a part of him yearning to connect rather than fight. "I agree," she replied, her tone firm yet inviting. "That's why I find it crucial to bring these discussions to the forefront, not to erase our past but to build upon it. Your wisdom is invaluable in this process." As their discussion unfolded, sprinkled with personal anecdotes and shared experiences, Jessica discovered cracks in his armor. He was not merely resistant, he was protective, possessed by a fear rooted deeply in seeing those who followed in his footsteps make mistakes he believed himself far too acquainted with. In that moment, Jessica's perspective shifted. She began to see herself, not just as a champion for change but as a bridge between old and new philosophies. It was one of her most profound realizations yet: she was capable of facilitating this transition rather than merely enforcing it. She felt a tug toward empathy. This wasn't about dismantling a legacy but about reshaping it. As the gathering wrapped up, the energy shifted, and sparks of collaboration surfaced. They brainstormed ways to meld time-tested methods with innovative practices, giving Jessica's vision a firmer foothold. But just as she basked in this personal revelation, an offhand comment from another colleague snapped her focus. "I'm just wondering, what happens when the CEO finds out how much you're unnerving the veterans?" The glimmer of concern ignited a fresh wave of anxiety. The stakes could be higher than she thought, and the balancing act felt precarious. In a heartbeat, Jessica understood that her journey was only intensifying. She was stepping out from the shadows of opposition into a broader battlefield. Would she cultivate enough support to protect her burgeoning vision from potential backlash? With uncertainty now thickening in the air, she stood at the edge of a precipice yet again, readying herself for the waiting storm. What had she unknowingly awakened in her quest for change? The next chapter of her transformation was fast approaching, an uncharted territory filled with the promise of chaos and revelation. Jessica couldn't shake the anxiety swelling in her chest as she replayed the words of her colleague, hanging in the air like a ticking bomb. The impact of the CEO learning about her pushing boundaries to provoke discussions with the veterans weighed heavily on her mind. As she sat at her desk the following morning, the stakes felt monstrous. her thoughts racing between the possibilities of gaining support and facing backlash. She acknowledged a sobering truth: her ambitions to innovate had rippling consequences, and she would need conviction in her vision to navigate the impending storm. Fueled by determination, Jessica crafted a presentation she hoped would not only articulate her ideas but also weave the stories of her colleagues into a cohesive narrative. This was not just her fight, it was collective evolution that demanded everyone's input, especially the seasoned veterans. The day rolled on, and the glow of her computer screen became an almost eerie reminder of the vulnerability that strung her taut. Deep down, she felt an urge to dive deeper beyond her departmental walls. The corporate culture had stifled voices for so long, and she realized that if she was to usher in change, she had to tap into those experiences. She had to listen more than she spoke. That evening, a chance opportunity arose. Jessica received an invite for an impromptu Zoom meeting with the CEO's office. Initially surprised but stirred by curiosity, she accepted, knowing it could be pivotal for her agenda. The hour drew near, and she rehearsed, ensuring she remained concise and impactful. The stakes felt dizzying, yet she readied herself to represent thoughts that danced in the background of every hall and every cubicle. When the call began, she joined quietly, observing as the CEO and a few top executives conversed. To her shock, the conversation turned toward the veteran employees. Their skepticism and the organization's historical hesitance to adapt were laid bare. A deep pang of empathy coursed through Jessica as she recognized their struggle reflected her own insecurities. Noticing how her heart raced as the department heads aired their frustrations, she grappled with her hesitation to speak up. Then came an unexpected moment. The CEO leaned closer to his camera, an expression of frustration shadowing his features. "We have innovators and champions among us," he stated. "Yet there's a fear of rocking the boat, of disappointing those who forged our path. If we continue ignoring our greatest assets, our people will lose relevance." Jessica felt a spark ignite within her. This was her moment not just to advocate for change, but to invoke collaboration as the core of their culture. With purpose, she unmuted herself and interjected. "What if we actively incorporate those voices? We could start workshops that include both the innovators and those who have walked the path of tradition. The conversation needs to include everyone if we want to bring about genuine adaptation without losing our roots." Silence hung for a heartbeat, and Jessica braced herself. Responses rippled through the virtual room. Initially, skepticism, but she noticed a familiar thread of hope weave as the executives began to nod. The CEO's response was carefully measured, yet she felt the shift in the atmosphere. "That's an interesting perspective, Jessica," he said thoughtfully. "Merging our strengths could be a considerable change." As the meeting drew to a close, Jessica felt lighter. The weight of uncertainty lessened, replaced by a cautious determination. Still, lurking at the back of her mind was that insistent question from her colleague, echoing louder as she considered the potential repercussions. Would the veterans resist her efforts if her ideas gained traction? Would the CEO truly support her vision? The uncertainty transformed into motivation. Jessica resolved to seek out the veterans, to talk to them openly about not just the future but the vital role they played in navigating it. It was time to face down her fears and lay her ambitions bare to stitch a fabric of unity, rather than division. Yet, as she planned her next steps, her phone buzzed unapologetically, displaying an urgent message from a trusted peer. "We need to talk. Rumor has it that there's a lot more at stake than you realize." Jessica's pulse quickened, and she felt the shadows once again creeping in. What new tension was waiting to unravel her hopes? She was prepared for change, but how much would it truly cost her? Jessica's resolve solidified as she paced her small kitchen, contemplating her next move. She had come too far to back down now. The uncharted territory ahead felt both menacing and exhilarating. The threat of rumors swirling about her vision for change only stoked the fire within her. This was her moment. She would seize it. In the days that followed, she transformed anxiety into purposeful action. Each morning began with a clear intention: to meet with the skeptics and potential allies alike, to hear their concerns and to build a coalition of shared ambitions. As she met with her colleagues one by one, the dialogue flowed, and she discovered that many shared her desire for growth but felt trapped by the unyielding grip of tradition. They yearned for innovation but were uncertain how to navigate the potential upheaval. Eager to cultivate partnership, Jessica organized a roundtable discussion, meticulously crafting an agenda that encouraged participation and candidness. This was not merely to persuade them to accept her ideas; this was a chance to incorporate their voices, their experiences, into a framework that acknowledged history while reaching for the future. In this space, she aimed to dismantle fears, weaving together a tapestry of collaboration that spoke to the breadth of their collective experiences. The day of the roundtable arrived, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. As colleagues gathered in the conference room, she sensed an array of emotions: curiosity, skepticism, and, beneath it all, a flicker of hope. What if we challenge the idea of the way things have always been done? She opened, capturing the room's attention. Her voice resonated with conviction, steady despite lingering uncertainty. Let us reflect on what we want our legacy to be and how we can reshape it moving forward. Jessica deftly facilitated the discussion, drawing out stories of their shared past, each success and challenge, and rooted her proposals in their collective journey. She watched as the initial tension in the room began to dissipate, each voice contributing threads of potential. When the veteran who had challenged her during the workshop spoke, she seized the opportunity. "There have been triumphs," he admitted, "yet I think we've also gotten comfortable." What happens when comfort becomes complacency? His admission felt like a breakthrough. This was the very heart of her intention. They were not antagonists, but co-creators of their future, and she was determined to harness their thoughts into a cohesive vision. With each suggestion, she remained agile, shifting her agenda to accommodate their ideas while ensuring her core principles shone through. As the discussion deepened, an unexpected ally emerged: a young employee. "I've seen how our community has struggled to connect with our mission. We need to identify what resonates with them, too." Her voice punctured the air like a declaration, sparking murmurs of agreement throughout the room. Jessica recognized this transformation as the definitive moment she had been yearning for. Her colleagues were starting to take ownership of their contributions. Her steadfast approach lit a path to collaboration, and together they designed actionable steps to reformulate outreach strategies, incorporating grassroots voices along the way. Leaving the meeting, Jessica felt a heavy weight lift from her shoulders. Not only had they conceived a unified plan sprouting from shared vision, but she could sense a thrill in the air, a collective energy geared toward their next steps, fueled by accountability and commitment. Weeks passed, and Jessica channeled this momentum into tangible projects: a pilot workshop incorporating community voices into their strategy sessions and outreach initiatives. The milestones they achieved together started to gain traction. The CEO began to take notice, attending sessions so he could hear directly from the employees engaged in change. Jessica's confidence amplified with each success, and soon she found herself partnered with management, developing frameworks for further innovation. However, just as she settled into this new rhythm, doubt slid into her thoughts. The word of the community's progress had spread, sparking whispers of change that reached back to the very veterans she had initially feared would resist her. There was a palpable tension as she faced them again, but this time she felt equipped with the understanding constructed from shared narratives. "What you're proposing is ambitious," the veteran leader remarked during a review meeting, yet a shadow of skepticism remained. "But can we trust this change won't derail what we stand for?" In that moment of quiet realization, Jessica grasped that she had cultivated not only new strategies, but also a bridge of empathy towards those who had initially doubted her. "This is our journey, not just mine," she responded, her voice firm yet inviting. "The legacy you've built is embedded in this pursuit, and together, we will ensure it continues to thrive. Let us define our future not as innovation in isolation, but as evolution rooted in history." Jessica could see the flicker of hope amidst a backdrop of hesitation. With each meeting, she bridged the gap, showing that collaboration made them not just a company but a community. The acknowledgement she sought was now manifesting around her in transformed dynamics and open dialogues, with every person at the table claiming a stake in their evolution. In that moment of resolution, Jessica experienced a profound shift, a surging confidence built on the foundation of her struggles. She relished the recognition of her growth. The timid woman who stumbled into a Zoom call had become an advocate, a leader woven into the very fabric of her organization. And yet, even as she savored this fulfillment, an undeniable truth lingered. Each step forward unveiled new layers of complexity. What awaited her as she further engaged with the community? How would she navigate the twists and turns still lying ahead? The journey was continuous, rich with uncertainties, and she felt ready to embrace all that lay ahead. Looking back at her path, she knew, this was not merely an ending, but an infinite beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.